Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Inside Today's Boardrooms, presented by Diligent Institute, your source for the latest and greatest in corporate governance, all in 10 minutes. I'm Dottie Schindlinger, Executive Director of the Diligent Institute, and I'll be your host. Today, I'm joined by John Rodi, co-leader at the KPMG Board Leadership Center. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Dottie, good to see you again. Thank you.
So at the Board Leadership Center, you recently published a piece on oversight of data-related risk, which is a topic that is very near and dear to our hearts here at Diligent. So why has data-related risk emerged as such a hot-button issue for companies and boards this year?
Yeah, so as you know, Dottie, data-related risks have been on the board agenda for quite some time now, really focusing around cybersecurity and data privacy. And I think companies have boards clearly understand the mission criticality, if you will, of those risks. But I think it's really been the explosion of generative AI that have caused boards and companies to take a step back and really assess how they're managing their data related risk. And this includes steps such as understanding the magnitude of those risks and who's managing them, thinking about the downside scenarios, making sure that boards are getting updated on a regular basis on these risks, as well as understanding how management is looking to address these risks and whether management is doing a risk assessment on a periodic basis. And that's really what our paper is really intended to help bring some of these conversations to life.
So you mentioned, of course, that generative AI is a major topic. What were some of the other most critical data-related risks that companies are dealing with that you found in the report?
Yeah, so a couple of items to note there, Dottie. I think first and foremost is data quality as well as data security. Second would be compliance with data privacy laws and regulations, for example, the EU's GDPR, as well as the California Consumer Privacy Act. Data ethics is another risk, and there we're talking about the tension between the use of customers' data in a legally permissible way, and then the customer's expectations of how companies might be using that data, and then data access as well, which also includes vendors and third parties that may have access to a company's data. The second part of the question, thinking about the kind of the framework that companies use to manage these risks, and what we see is that framework really focuses on four main items. First is data quality. Second would be data stewardship. Third would be data protection, and then fourth would be data management.
That's really helpful. Well, so let's go back a step to generative AI, because you brought it up, and obviously it's been the topic that has dominated boardroom conversations now for about 18 months. So what are some of the most significant risks that the use of Gen AI is posing for companies today? And what are some of the ways that companies are managing those risks and updating their data governance frameworks and policies?
Yeah, well, you're right about this dominating boardroom discussions. And it's hard to believe that if we're sitting here 2 years ago, we hadn't even really heard about this topic yet. So I always think about what we're going to talk about 2 years from now, which will probably be totally different. But to kind of focus on maybe some of the more significant risks first, the first part of your question, I think the first would be the risk of the data or the results not being accurate. And this could be from poor data quality or something more nefarious, such as data poisoning. Second is the risk of bias that could result from the use of generative AI, and that's based on the bias that is inherent in some algorithms. And for example, this could include biases in healthcare scoring or access to healthcare services or job application vetting or loan credit decisions. That risk of bias is very real. Third would be a risk of just privacy as well as compliant risks. I mentioned some of the laws and regs that are out there already. In fact, the EU recently passed the AI Act, which is the first attempt to manage and regulate AI on a global basis. So making sure that a company is staying in compliant with those laws and regs. And other risks include IP risk, reputation risk, skills and training, items like that. As far as the second part of your question, as far as managing those risks, we kind of look at it kind of back to a framework. Kind of first is really determining when a AI model or system is being developed and who has authorization for making that decision within an organization, making sure there's an inventory of where generative AI is being used, making sure that management understands who, from a company standpoint, is on point for really overseeing the use of generative AI, whether or not there's a cross functional team involved there as well. Making sure there's a responsible use AI policy, one that matches the company's values as an organization. And then a point I've already mentioned, but just making sure that you're staying current on any regulatory developments in that space.
That's really, really good advice. You talked a little bit ago about cybersecurity risk, and obviously that's been a critical area of focus for companies and boards for quite a number of years now. But I'd like to have you reflect a little bit on how generative AI has impacted a company's cybersecurity risk profile, because I think there's some kind of new dimensions there.
Yeah, I think first maybe talk about some of the risk again that would be inherent in generative AI. I think some of the poor uses of it, if you will, or those that don't have good intentions, it can now be used to write code and hack that can help create more realistic deepfakes. It can certainly also increase the scale of what bad actors might do. So I think what's important to counter these risks is for cybersecurity teams to really review their security postures, looking at their current systems, making sure they identify vulnerabilities, and then making adjustments to ensure that a company's data is being well protected.
That's great. So, John, we've covered a lot of ground already, looking at things like the governance and policies around AI, generative AI, cybersecurity, risk management. I mean, it's a lot of moving parts for leaders to keep an eye on. So, when you kind of take a step back and look at the big picture, are there specific keys to effective data governance that they should keep in mind? I mean, what does good look like?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I think every company's data governance framework might be a little bit different, but I think broadly speaking, maybe a couple of guiding principles that we would suggest each company keep in mind. One is making sure that your policy, make sure that aligns with your company's strategy. How does it line up with the company's strategic goals? Second is making sure that there's sound structure around your data governance program, including clear lines of reporting of who's responsible for what within an organization, whether or not that's your chief data officer, your chief information officer, your CISO, making sure it's clear who's responsible for what. And then back to a point I've already mentioned, making sure that then you have a sound system for ensuring compliance with laws and regulations.
That's really terrific. Well, unfortunately, John, that's all the time that we have for today. But I want to thank you so much for sharing this paper with us and outlining some of the key findings.
Always good to be with you, Dottie. Thank you.
So hopefully you'll all take a moment to download and read the full white paper, which you can find at kpmg.com in the Board Leadership Center. And any other tips there, John, for the best place to find the report?
Nope, I think you got it. Got it great. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for watching the show, and we'll see you next time.